Welcome everyone to this virtual music careers event hosted by Wells Cathedral School and open to all young people considering a career in the music profession. I'm Mark Stringer, Director of Music and Managing Director of Cedars Hall, a public performance venue at Wells Cathedral School. Today's event runs until 3 o'clock. This session is focused on those wanting to find out what it's like to be a composer in this day and age in the music profession. And it will be followed at 1:30 by a focus on those thinking about a career in music education. At 2 o'clock, there's a commercial music segment. And finally, at 2:30, one focused on those thinking about becoming an orchestral player or wanting to work as a freelancer as a musical career. All of the sessions will feature guests who have made a successful career in music, and we're really honoured today to have two fantastic composers, Sam Wedgwood and Owen Park. And I'd like them to introduce themselves to you. I want them to say a few words about their career, and how they actually got into the music profession. And I hope that this will be really informative for those of you wanting to find out about that. You'll have an opportunity to leave feedback, and you can find that in the information section of this video, where there's a form. And if you want to ask some questions, please could you email them to m.stringer, that's m.stringer at wells.cathedral.school. m.stringer at wells.cathedral.school. So first of all, I'm going to hand over to Sam Wedgwood. Thank you, Sam.
All right. Have I popped up? Have I popped up in everyone's?
I think you have.
Good. Well, hi. Well, hi, everybody. My name's Sam Wedgwood. I'm beaming from Australia, the east coast of Australia, so I hope you can hear me okay and there's not too much of a time lag. But yes, thank you very much, Mark, for that. When people ask me how one gets into music, I have this a few moments of, right, yeah, how did it happen? And it is quite I think it can be very different for many different people. There are lots of different angles and ways in. And personally, for me, I went to Wells Cathedral many years ago, and I was a trumpet player. And I think I cut my teeth doing orchestral trumpet with my teacher was Mr. Denegri at the time, and yes, that was how I had this background in orchestra, being an orchestral player. And then when I left school, I kind of took that with me, and it kind of lay kind of dormant for many years. And then it actually kind of popped up and went, look, I think a composition career could be actually something which would work for me. So and that's where I started to pursue. So how I got into it is largely a bit of a strange one, because if you want the absolute truth, it was because my next door neighbor knew Chesney Hawkes, who was an 80s one hit wonder, and he knew my next door neighbors, and we got introduced to each other, and he knew his mate knew the CEO of a music library service that called Audio Network. And then the next thing I knew, I was writing an album with Chesney Hawkes, which was a bit bizarre, for Audio Network and for music for production for media, really. So that was my introduction into the world of
that's absolutely amazing, that a chance meeting like that, and or being living next door to someone with those connections. And I suppose once you're in to some extent, as long as you make a good job of everything, you might be asked by someone else then to do something. What would you have done, Sam, if you hadn't had that sort of fate or fortune that gave you that opportunity?
I think that's a very good question, and I often think about it. I've been a composer now for nearly 6-7 years now, full time. And if I hadn't had that experience, that kind of chance encounter, I probably would have been still teaching music one-to-one, be it kind of trumpet. I was also working in function bands as well, doing kind of gigs around and about. So I think I would probably still be full-time teaching probably. But it was interesting because at the time, before I started going down the composition route, I was thinking, I feel like I need to branch out into other ways in the music world. I thought composition might be a good way of doing other things to complement the gigging as well. So
yeah, well, that's amazing. I mean, because going into composing, it's not like a lot of jobs. There's not a job interview, an application process, and all of that, really, is there?
No.
And I obviously knew quite a bit about you, but I've done some research, and I was amazed at just how much performing you've done. I mean, you as a multi instrumentalist, you work with Jamie Cullum. You've travelled the globe. And you must meet a lot of people, obviously, and surely that's one of the things that's so important. If you're meeting people in various capacities in the music industry, some of those people must be really useful contacts for you.
I think you couldn't. Yes, you are absolutely spot on there. I think at the time when I was doing a touring stint with Jamie in his outfit, I didn't realize how important. I wish I had capitalized on it, monopolized on it a lot more, because and I was quite young and I was all wide-eyed and oh, you want to use me, and I didn't really think about, okay, so I'm being a musician in his outfit, but these contacts that I'm going to be making now will be contacts that I will know for the next, well, donkeys. I'm still in contact with them now, and everyone is connected, be it not just in the composition world, but in the live music world. So yes, I wish I'd made more of that at the time.
All right. Well, fantastic. Look, there's so much that we want to ask you, but I'd like to bring in Owen Park, if I may. And I'm hoping, Owen, that you're magically going to appear. Oh, there you are. Fantastic. Yeah. Great to see you. Thank you for joining us. And I suppose I really ought to ask you the same question, and find out how it was that you came to be where you are now.
Well, lovely to be here. I was at Wells not too long ago, I think, and had the most fantastic time. And one of the opportunities that I was afforded was to write for all sorts of different groups. So with Paul Dennegar and his wonderful brass 10 players, I wrote some pieces to be done in the cathedral, and I wrote for the cathedral choir and for solo voices and instruments. And there were so many opportunities when I was there, so I really valued that. I guess it kind of started when I was having organ and piano lessons, and I used to, instead of practicing my pieces, I would just sit down and kind of improvise my way through whatever, and I could sit there for hours and not get bored. And I sort of took a couple of these to my organ teacher, and he said, I think he didn't tell me they were any good, so that was fine. I think he told my mum. He said, actually, okay, he might be all right. So I just sort of carried on, to be honest. And actually, Sam, it's amazing you're dialing in from Australia. So I'm coming in from York. It's not where I live. I'm just working up here at the moment, and it's actually a place where I felt like I sort of arrived as a composer and understood that I could do it, because there was the National Centre for Early Music's composition competition. That was back in 2010, and that was the first thing I ever won or got sort of any recognition for. And I remember coming up, and it was a workshop, and there were lots of other composers here, and I heard all of their pieces and thought, wow, they're all amazing. And mine was completely different. And I thought they're never gonna like it, or you know, it's too simple or whatever. But actually, they did, and that sort of said to me, okay, right, you know, you can do this. And that was a really, really good moment. And this competition's been going now for 11 years, and it's absolutely fantastic. And they alternate it between choir and sort of recorder ensemble and that kind of thing. But the fact that, you know, the piece was broadcast on Radio 3 and it received national press coverage. I mean, competitions, while they do take composers time, and often you can write lots of pieces for competitions and receive no reward. If you get lucky or you get noticed by somebody, and as Sam was talking about the contacts that you make, it can be a really useful resource. So I think that they're a really good thing. Yeah, if composers want to sort of get going, I'd say what competitions also do is it gives you a framework, and they say, you know, we want you to set this text, or we want you to write a piece for this many instruments to last this long. And having that as a composer, I think, is useful just to sort of channel your thoughts, because often when you're starting, you don't know, what am I supposed to write? There's too many options. I could write anything. So it's nice to have that framework to build into.
Yeah. Well, that's really fascinating. I mean, I've got a number of questions here now coming through to ask you. One, I suppose, playing devil's advocate. So this is not me speaking as director of music, a specialist music school that's a lot more than that as well, of course, at Wells. But did you find parents, guardians, friends, family, you know, saying, you know, you're mad to think about going into a career as a musician, first of all, but then, you know, as a composer, you know, is it like someone saying, oh, I'm going to be an artist, and they must be wondering about, will they be able to pay a mortgage? Will they be able to survive and put a meal on the table? I mean, how did that go for you two? I mean, maybe Owen first.
Well, yeah, I think it's a question that everyone asks. It's not just parents or guardians, but also, us as musicians. You know, how are we going to make this work? And I think one of the ways that I found was just take every opportunity. So I was an organist as well. So that's kind of why the main reason I came to Wales was to be organ scholar. And so that enabled me to earn a bit of money on the side, playing for weddings, and playing for, you know, continuo parts and accompanying choir rehearsals. And just having that sort of versatility, you know, is useful as a keyboardist to not just sort of do one thing, but to allow yourself to just try out lots of different things, and, you know, just keep yourself busy. And it's not a good idea to hold down a job in sixth form, really, but, you know, you give it a go. It's quite a lot of fun, and there are, at the moment, it's more tricky. I would, you know, struggle to imagine exactly what I would have done if maybe, you know, I'd just started university now, or I'd had a gap year or something, and I think it would feel like everything had just been on pause. And, you know, we've been lucky as professional musicians to be allowed to continue work in some capacity. For those just starting out, it must be really tricky. So what I'm hoping is that these opportunities, like the competitions and like the workshops and masterclasses, they all come back, and they come back with a vengeance, because people need those experiences and need to have that interaction with the professional world to think, yeah, actually, do you know what, I can do this. It's a sort of confidence builder, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. I mean, my main music that gets heard on television and radio are basically going to be probably about 20, maybe 3 seconds to about 10 seconds to 30 seconds, maybe a minute, and they are picked up by channels all over the globe, and essentially a micro payment gets delivered, depending on when it's aired, synced with the visual. And when I first started in this, doing this, and I remember my first royalty payment, I almost, you know, I went white, and I just thought, this isn't going to work, because it was absolutely minuscule, and I was naive to think that, as soon as I've got music on television and radio, everything's going to be fine. I'll be able to pay the mortgage, etc., etc. But it quickly became apparent that you're playing the long game. You're going to be hopefully getting quality music into a system which will repeat and repeat and repeat over many, many years if the quality is usable and good. And that was a big learning curve for me, realizing that, oh gosh, I need to think much more like long term here, and build up a portfolio of music, a library of my own stuff, which will gain momentum over the time. So that, going into what you were saying there, Mark, how when people say, oh, you want to become a composer, you know what, it's for some people, maybe like a best case scenario, a year, 2 years, you could probably do, yeah, you might be able to pay your way in and do it full time or something. But I would say that it's a longer game. You need to think a little bit more.
That's really interesting. I just want to say, for those people that are joining us or have joined us since the very beginning of this, this is a virtual music careers event hosted by Wells Cathedral School. I'm Mark Stringer, the Director of Music at Wells Cathedral School, and talking to two former pupils, Sam Wedgwood and Owen Park, who have been, even though they're both extremely young, very, very successful musicians. Both have worked as performers, but they really have focused on composition, and that is their main trade. And both of them have a remarkable body of work behind them. And I thought it would just really nice, actually, if you could just maybe mention a few of the things that you have been doing and that you've written. So, I mean, Sam, do you want to just tell us a little bit, you know, sort of to talk us through the portfolio briefly of what you have done?
Okay, so what I think to date I've done I think I've done 11 studio albums now, I would say. So 11 studio albums of, say, 7 to 8 tracks in each of those albums, probably about 2 to 3 minutes worth of music. And those have been in my field of writing, they're largely orchestral. They would be strings with woodwind, combinations, perhaps a more band context, but they are always live music. It's always recorded live, so it's always pretty much done Abbey Road, either in kind of Studio 2 or 3, and it's with usually a tight string section of maybe like a double string quartet, or if it depends what kind of music you write, they might need larger forces, but generally that's what I'm doing. So I create, and this is why I get to live in Australia, because I'm a bit like a satellite. I write the music here, and I do the mock-ups using samples and everything, and then I try and persuade the audio network, please record my music for me, and they'll either go, yeah, that's great, or no, that's not great, and then we'll score it up for whatever project they see that they need a usage in their library. So if they need lots of comedy music, or they might need something darker, then that depends what they want to do.
And just to ask very quickly, do the, you know, the sort of the royalties that you get, you know, from doing TV and commercial stuff, you know, is that, you were talking before about building up sort of a body of work, you know, and so it's like an investment portfolio in a way. You've written something, and although you'll be working on something new and exciting, you'll still got the potential to be earning for what you've written in the past, and that will keep on going. You know, it's like performance fees in a way.
Yeah, I can't say how important it is that when you've got a bit of body of work, that body of work will sustain you through maybe a couple of months where you actually have to be creative. And when your royalties come in quarterly from the PRS or whatever government collecting agency, then that period of time is really, really crucial. But I think I think from my own personal experience, because I write largely orchestral music has you can, if it's recorded well, with a great team at the Abbey Road or Air Studios or wherever, then it has the potential to roll on for many, many years and keep generating, as long as it's good and it has a longevity. So still, like one of my tracks that was recorded 6 years ago is still giving me something, every month, and that's really nice. It's kind of,
wow. I'm most envious. That's fantastic. And I know you sort of started off really when you finished as a performer, even in rock rather than classical, but you've gone more into the that orchestral and piano writing, I think. But
yes.
what about you? Can you tell us about the sort of things that you've written?
Yeah, so the majority of the stuff I've written is for choir, and it was I signed with Music Sales, so Novello, about 6 years ago. They publish all of the pieces I write, and so I've written for groups like Tenebrae, the Tallis Scholars perform my pieces, the BBC Singers, that kind of thing. So the nice thing about that is once you get really top-rate professional choir to do your stuff and they record it well, a bit like Sam was saying, then other people hear about it. And I think maybe a sort of difference there is that with the sheet music aspect, we get lots of different performers performing the music. So that's kind of how the majority of my income would be made, apart from the commission fees, would actually be from the sort of live performances or the radio broadcasts of different choirs performing the pieces. And the nice thing about the collecting agencies is they also help with Europe and the rest of the world. So I had a period a couple of years ago where I had a lot of pieces done in Norway. No idea why. Can't remember who they were by, but that was that, and that was great. And it's quite cool just to see how you sort of finish a piece in manuscript form. It gets sent off to the publishers, gets its first performance, and then the real challenge is, when's it going to get performed again? Who's going to do it? Is it just going to be that group? And it's just trying to work out how you sort of help with the distribution of that. That's something a publisher does, but it's that they're also looking after lots of different composers. So we as composers are sort of quite responsible for that self-promotion, and it's often quite an awkward thing to have to do, to promote your own music. And so that's a sort of, it's a technique that you gradually learn, and you never perfect, but some people are very good at it, and some people are less good at it. So
yeah. Well, I was going to ask you a little bit more about that in a minute. I mean, we've got about 5 minutes to go. I was just wondering if you could give some advice to young composers that are listening. I had a wonderful interview with Jeffrey Archer, novelist, and he was talking about how he sort of starts work, I think it's at 9 o'clock in the morning, writes whatever day it is, every single day of the week till 10:30, has a coffee break, gets back to the desk at 11, and then works through till lunch, and doesn't wait looking up at the ceiling or whatever for inspiration. How do you both work? Do you have a strict timetable, or do you only write when something, the mood takes you?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's different for everyone. I'm sure me and Sam will probably be quite different. I suppose part of it is writing to a brief. So if that's a competition or a commission, whatever that might be. Part of it is, I mean, you think of composers, they carry around manuscript everywhere. They get all these ideas when they're out, at the shops at Tesco or something. You sort of write it down. For me, it's kind of I need to be in the zone. And that often happens sort of quite late at night, actually. I find that I go through a whole day, I kind of clear my desk of emails and that sort of thing, all that administrative side of being a musician, which is, you have to do it. But you go through that, and then once you've sort of cleared your mind a bit, then you can write. And when I was at Trinity, Cambridge, they had, as organ scholar, I had keys to the chapel, so I was able to have this wonderful composing studio late at night, and the porters, if I kept the lights low, they wouldn't know I was in there, so I just used to write and keep writing. So it's often about where you are and sort of what mood you're in, I think, but it's different for everyone. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree totally with where you're coming from. I also, because a friend of mine actually just asked me the other day, and it really got me thinking, and I probably gravitated to the fact that I see being creative as a muscle you need to exercise, and sometimes when you feel like you're the least creative, or you just don't want to do it, that's the time when you just need to force yourself. This is personally, and I think, and just sit at the piano and see what happens. But you've got to do it personally, I think you've got to try and do it day in, day out, and just be strong with yourself. It's like things will pop out of your head. Yeah. Lord knows how it happens, and it's amazing when you think, oh, you start with nothing and you end with something. But I do think it's a muscle which needs to be exercised and continuously. But like you said, Owen, I think if you are in a like a beautiful chapel area, things will inspire you, and I think that's hugely important as well. It's certainly more than one way to skin a cat, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, we're going to need to round off very shortly. I just wondered if you'd both just have a think, if there's one tip or something you'd like to pass on to the young composers and other kinds of musicians that are listening. I used to write my own compositions and do arrangements and things like that. And sometimes, I suppose that the fear was writer's cramp or composer's cramp and running out of ideas and using all your ideas or too many ideas too quickly. And I was always told to take a leaf out of Haydn or Beethoven's book, if you like, in that if you get to the point where you think, I don't know how to carry on with this, I don't know what to write next, that very often you will find something what you've already written that you can explore more and use that. And I found that quite useful. But I don't know if you've got a tip each that you can just offer to those listening.
Well, yeah, I think that the muscle analogy is a really good one, because if you don't try, then it's gonna, you sort of brush it off a bit, sort of dust it off and kind of get going. I think the good thing about being at Wells was that you could try your ideas out. And that was always, if you've got a few friends around you, Sam sort of emphasised the fact that his pieces are done by a live orchestra, and the better the musicians, the better his work will go, because it will have, beyond the composition, it will have a longevity, because people can hear that sort of that quality and that enthusiasm from the musicians. And if you can learn as a composer how to deliver that through your score, because so much of that, you're writing for the musicians, but you're often not there, and you have to present them with something. And so the sort of quality of your writing, is something that you can only learn sort of on the job and by interacting with other musicians. And so I hope we can get back to that before too long.
Great, indeed. Thank you. I totally agree. I'm sure everyone does. That's absolutely what we all hope for. And Sam, very quickly, can I just ask you to sort of round off before I say the final?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, just jumping on the end of what Owen was saying there. The musicians are the ones, they hold the keys. They will breathe. They will be the ones breathing life into the dots. And I think as a composer, it's hugely important to always remember that they're the really clever ones here. And going back to your point with tips to perhaps people thinking about going into compositional world, I think I will pass on the tip that my boss at Audio Network, Andrew Sunnox, said to me when I first started doing it, and I was green as the hills, and he said, listen, just write, don't ask questions, just get as much, just don't ask questions, just try and get as much as you can out, enjoy the process, because what you will produce, it will be something that you will enjoy, and 9 times out of 10 that should be pretty good, because you'll enjoy doing it and it will be inspired. So and companies can then hone your ideas, and you can then work with these institutions, these companies, because they'll say, well, listen, we love this, but can we start to look at it in that? But ultimately, it's just don't ask questions, just be creative, get going.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you both. For those that are listening, I hope you will just go and Google these guys. It's amazing what you'll find out about them. They've got brilliant web pages and all sorts of things that have been written about them. You've both been inspirational and informative. Thank you so much on behalf of Wells Cathedral School and all those beyond Wells Cathedral School that have tuned in. We're most grateful to you. And I will now hand over, I think Alison Armstrong is going to host the session on music education. Thank you, guys. Goodbye.
Thanks,
See you later. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today for our careers event at Wells Cathedral School. My name's Alison Armstrong and I'm the Deputy Director of Music at Wells. And I'm delighted today to be joined by 3 former pupils who are going to be talking to us today about music education. So welcome, Hannah and Kate and Emily. How lovely to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. Emily, Kate and Hannah all work in the field of music education, and I'm firstly going to ask them to tell us about their current role and what that entails. But meanwhile, if anyone watching has any questions for us, please do email me. My email address is a.armstrong@wells-cathedral-school.com, and I'll do my best while we're juggling the technology to pick up any questions that you might have for any of our speakers today. So first of all, Emily, can we come to you first of all? Would you like to tell us a little bit about your role and what that entails?
Of course, yeah. Thank you for inviting me today, Alison. It's a real pleasure to be involved. So I'm Director of Music at Blackheath High School, which is an independent girls' school in South East London. And some of you may be familiar with the GDST, which is the Girls' Day School Trust, which is a family of 26 schools and academies. So Blackheath High is one of those schools. And actually being part of that family of schools brings so many benefits, which I'll talk about in a moment. But my day-to-day role is running the music department. I oversee all the peripatetic staff. I organise all the co-curricular music and all the academic music. And I teach year 7 up to year 13, which I really enjoy because it's really, really varied. And I think, you know, it's great to see my students sort of at their early career in secondary school and then be able to take them all the way through. I've also got some other hats as well that I wear in my role at Blackheath High School. So I'm also head of co-curricular and outreach. So I actually oversee the whole clubs programme for the whole school, which I really enjoy because I actually have control about what direction we can take the school in with regards to co-curricular, which particularly for an independent school is a really sort of big marketing tool. I also oversee that outreach. So we do a lot of partnership work with local schools, care homes. And again, I really enjoy that because it actually, you know, allows our students to be exposed to so many other different people, different walks of life as well. I'm also a school consultant teacher, so I've got a really big interest in teaching and learning. So I oversee a lot of the teaching and learning that goes on within the school. And that's something that's over time has become a real interest to me and is sort of an area that I'm sort of looking to develop my skills slightly more. So that's my day-to-day role. And within the GDST, I do quite a lot for the Trust Head Office, working with other schools, sharing ideas and working together on collaborative projects as well. So that's what I do.
Okay, thank you very much. Hannah, how about you? Nice to see you today.
Hello, it's lovely to see you today. Very lovely. I think I'd say to people that I'm a freelance violin and viola teacher, but actually on a day-to-day basis or in a weekly basis, I have a huge variety of different roles. I teach in 3 different schools, one private school, which is a boys' school, years 1 to 8. I teach in a secondary school where I only teach orchestras and chamber groups. That's a state school, which I think is quite unusual. And I teach in a 3rd school where I've started a string project from, it's a brand new school, state school again, year 7, and I'm teaching violin from the very, very beginnings. But I've specialised as a Suzuki teacher, which has been something that's kind of developed always been there, but has really developed over the years. And a great deal of my week is teacher training new Suzuki teachers and helping them to and letting them observe my teaching. So I'd say I have 4 full days of individual violin and viola teaching in my week, varying from 3-year-olds up to adult teachers. But on top of that, I go around the world doing workshops, teaching orchestras and big Suzuki groups and choirs, and quite nomadic. No week is ever the same, but it's very enjoyable work.
I think a lot of musicians would say that, wouldn't they? That no week is ever the same, whether you're teaching or whatever.
No, I mean, I do have a structure, and my weeks during term time do follow the same patterns, and I love it when it comes to the school holidays, just for a change of routine. But the school holidays are as very much as part of my work, and as my weekly pupils that I see, and the annual workshops that I go to across the world. I'm working in next week. I'm teacher training in Madrid, at home on Zoom, which actually is much more effective and much more efficient. My wife, but as throughout the year, I do lots of very exciting things that build up and return every year.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Kate, lovely to see you too.
Lovely to see you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Kate. I am currently the head of production at Music for Youth. I've been there about 7 years now in a few various different roles. So for those of you who don't know, Music for Youth is a UK-wide music education charity. We work with young people, 21 and under. We take all genres of music, all standards of music, from very grassroots level all the way through to kind of a world-class performance level, with a showcase that many of you might know of called the Music for Youth Proms, which was formerly the Schools Proms at the Royal Albert Hall. So my current role with Music for Youth is I manage and programme and look after the relationships with all the large events. So I produce the National Festival, which is a 5-day festival in Birmingham across multiple different venues. And I also produce the Proms at the Albert Hall, which is usually a 3-day event where we'll kind of showcase and highlight the great and good of music education across the UK, which I can honestly say has been the nicest job at the moment, because it is incredible. What is being produced across the UK is phenomenal. So it's a really enjoyable job to have.
Okay, thank you very much. So I suppose my next question is going to be about how did you get there? So, you know, I remember you all being pupils at Wells and your various specialist musician roles and trying to teach you A-level. I seem to remember doing that too. But what can you just talk us through sort of how you got to where you did today, and maybe the sort of key points that led you to the career that you're involved in at the moment? So Emily, how about that question?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think the first thing I'd like to say is actually, when I was at Wells, if you had said to me as an 18-year-old that in 20 years' time I would be doing what I'm doing now, I would never have believed you. So I think one of the most important things is to realise that you are on a journey. And I think the music industry, possibly more than lots of other professions, actually does take you on a very long and windy journey. So I went to the Royal College of Music and studied percussion. Had a great time there. I had a really inspiring percussion teacher, Kevin Hathaway, who was really into outreach and education work. And so as one of his students, he took us out and we did loads of workshops, and developing those skills, I think, was incredibly important, because it sort of took us out of that bubble of we were going to play in an orchestra, or, you know, that we're going to be in the world of classical music. And so that opened my eyes to quite a lot of things. And I was also doing quite a bit of percussion teaching when I was at college, because I really enjoyed it. And it was never one of those things. Obviously, it was financially very, very helpful during my student years, but actually I did really enjoy it. And I found that actually I had a real knack for teaching, and I really enjoyed it. So once I graduated, I was doing some lovely teaching. I was teaching at Junior Trinity, at Royal Holloway, and some other sort of schools in South East London. And I was doing a lot of outreach and education work. And that was the work that I was doing. I was doing some stuff for the RPO and the Britten Symphonia, organisations like that. I did the Chamber Talks project with Wigmore Hall. I also did quite a lot of work in prisons, improving literacy with the prisoners through music. And that was something that was really, really rewarding. I really enjoyed that. But I also had a percussion duo called Drum Blondes, And so we did a lot of education and outreach work, particularly with special schools and sort of alternative provision. And then the key moment, I think, where things started to change was I had my eldest son. And living in London and having no family nearby, actually trying to juggle a freelance career, because I was doing a lot of playing, I was doing quite a lot at the Royal Opera House, trying to juggle that with a small child when you've got really irregular hours and you think you'd have your childcare sorted out for the whole week, and then you get called up and you said, oh, you know, can you come and do this week? And all of a sudden everything's up in the air. And actually managing that with a husband who's also freelance was really, really tricky. And so as time went on, I did less playing and I did a bit more teaching. And I was working at a girls' school, and there was a head of music there who had been there for 30 years, and she wanted to start to reduce her hours. And the headmaster came and spoke to me, and he said, Emily, we've always been really impressed with you. So this is another key thing I think is important, is that wherever you are and whatever you're doing, make sure you are having an impact. Because even little me as a percussion teacher, just coming in one day a week, I had an impact. The headmaster knew who I was always at the concerts, I had a great little percussion ensemble. And so when she wanted to go part-time, he said to me, would you like to do a GTP? We'll train you and we'd like you to work here. So at that point, that seemed like a really good thing to do because I wanted to do something else. I was ambitious. I wanted to be successful. I didn't quite know what direction I was going to go in, and this seemed like a really good option. And so from there, that was a really key point. So I did my GTP there, I did my NQT there, and straight from being an NQT, I then went into a director of music job. And so that was a really key point, just having that absolute faith and confidence in myself and my own ability, which is something I developed as a musician, of having to perform at a high level, having to be really organised, having to be proactive. All of those skills put me in such a good position to, actually progress up the sort of teaching ladder quite quickly. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. It's so interesting to hear how all your careers were developed. I'm fascinated. Thank you, Hannah. Over to you.
Yeah. I was a violinist at Wells and left knowing that I loved playing the violin, but not thinking that I really wanted to perform all the time. So I always knew that I liked organising things and I liked teaching. And one of the most favourite things I liked at Wells was taking the sectionals for the orchestras when the leaders of the sections took the orchestra. And I think that gave me a real foundation. So I went to Goldsmiths University of London, continued to take orchestra rehearsals, string sectionals, and that led to taking whole orchestra rehearsals for the university. I would agree with the do everything and anything and take opportunities from all the people you meet. So during when I was at university, I took on a teaching job in a little Kadai school and did Kadai training for the 3 years of my degree. And I also worked for National Youth Orchestra as a house staff, whatever it was called, in the holidays, worked at the Cheltenham Festival. And all of those things gave me access to these amazing people who I became friends, but also you just observed them teaching and working with people. And it's a real eye-opener for what you want to do in the future. So then I was very lucky. My first tutor from Wells phoned me when I was just finishing my degree and said, I have a new course at the Royal Northern. It's a combination of a postgraduate diploma and a PGCE in secondary music. It's a string specialist course. You would be the perfect first person to do the course. Please, will you come? So I had 2 years of postgraduate paid for and led by Penny Sterling, who is quite a cool character. Unfortunately, that course doesn't exist anymore, but it was a real, I had to work like I've never worked before, because basically I was doing 2 postgraduate courses, and a PGCE in inner Manchester is quite hard work anyway at the best of times. It was an amazing 2 years. I hated living in Manchester and I ran back to London just the minute I could with all my wonderful friends in London. I think going to university, you meet a bigger, wider variety of people. And I had some fabulous friends who would spend very late nights playing folk music in pubs, and I'd go and play with the Philharmonia one day and I'd be jamming with an Irish band that happened to make the charts the next day. Just this wonderful lifestyle. Anyway, when I finished in Manchester, I ran back to London, and most of the pupils that I'd left 2 years earlier phoned me up and said, would I continue teaching them? They'd had 2 years with other people. Would I, that kind of cemented my teaching career. The Suzuki Teacher Training started pretty simultaneously. It's a 5-level course, which can take 5 years, or that carried on. And basically, the schools that I've taught in, I've stayed in, I haven't really ever applied for a job. I've just grown jobs. And I now chair the trustees of the British Suzuki Institute, British Suzuki, which gives me a great role as working with people of all sorts of, from all sorts of places. The orchestras that I now conduct, or I like to say I'm really good at rehearsing orchestras, I'm not very good at conducting, is a brilliant job, because you work with hundreds and hundreds of children and you give them a real experience. And that came straight from the days of taking orchestra sectionals at Wells and then university. So that I'm very thankful for.
Okay, thank you very much. So to you, Kate.
I'm slightly different actually to Emily and Hannah, because in contrast, I mean, I loved Wells and I had such a good time, but I was never destined really to be a professional musician. You know, I kind of coming to Wells and seeing everybody that I was playing alongside, I loved music and I still love music, but it was just, I just wasn't really good enough to do that. And you know, I kind of wanted to keep that joy. And it was actually the late Jan Faulkner who actually inspired me to go into music education, because she set up something, I think, Alison, correct me if I'm wrong, it was called Play Well, Play Wells.
That's right, yep.
And one afternoon she said, Kate, why don't you come with me? We're going to go to an old people's home and we're going to go and play some music in an old people's home. And I remember going there and it just kind of ignited something that I'd never experienced before, kind of seeing the joy that other people see through music and kind of the light that came in their eyes, singing songs that, you know, that they hadn't heard for years, or, you know, hadn't kind of done live in person. It was just incredible. And it was such an incredible experience. And it was something I did with Jan for kind of the best part of at least a whole term, I think. And I remember at that point thinking I would love to go and do music therapy, because this would be just an incredible experience. And if, you know, I could see people enjoying it that much, I would like to kind of, you know, try and bring this joy to many other people across the country. So at the time you couldn't do an undergraduate music therapy course. So I went to City University, which was the only university which had a module in music therapy. And I must admit, I didn't particularly enjoy the course apart from the music therapy section. But actually it was really good for me, because it meant I went out and got loads of work experience. And that would be certainly something to anybody who's watching this today, that if you do decide to go and do kind of some music education, or you become a portfolio musician, which is a big buzzword at the moment, go out and get as much experience as you can whilst you're still studying, because I must say, the amount of people that apply for positions now within the music education sector that have got a wealth of experience on their CVs is huge. It really is huge. So as much as you can do whilst you're studying, I would completely recommend. So I went out and I worked with lots of local music education hubs. I was singing with a chorus at the time and did quite a lot of education work with them, which got me in touch with LSO Discovery, and I did some work with them at the time whilst I was a student. And then I took a role straight after I graduated with, it's no longer an organisation, but with the Milton Keynes City Orchestra. And it was a funny old organisation, and there was only 4 of us, but it was brilliant because I got to do everything. So right from the beginning of my career, I was never pigeonholed. It wasn't like I worked in the marketing department, or I worked in the concerts department, or I worked in education. I got to experience everything, which again, earlier on in your career, I would really recommend, because especially, you know, at the time, I would have loved to have gone straight to the London Symphony Orchestra and have worked for their discovery department, but actually I wouldn't have necessarily had those experiences had I not, you know, worked somewhere so small. And so I worked with them for about 18 months, and then I got a position at the London Symphony Orchestra. Interestingly, not for a job I applied for. I went for a concerts job. I went to go and be their concerts and tours assistant, and I had quite a horrific interview with anybody who knows somebody called Sue Mallett, and she was, gosh, she was painful. I love her, but it was a painful interview. And yeah, actually, at the end, I thought, there's no way I've ever got a job here. This is ridiculous. And she said, actually, she called me up the next day and said, would you like to come work in our education department? Because I think you clearly are much more suited to this, and it's clearly where your passion lies. And education department jobs for, you know, kind of big orchestras and things don't come up very often. So I was absolutely delighted, and I worked with them for 6 years. And then I got to a point where there was nowhere for me to progress. I kind of got to a point where I was kind of middle management, and there were no manager roles, and it was kind of looking, you know, to be that none of those managers were moving out of those roles either. So the job came up at Music for Youth, and it's been a really good step for me, actually. I've really enjoyed it, because I've kind of gone from a very music education world, which it was at the London Symphony Orchestra, and working for kind of a really big brand, to kind of going to something which is still quite a big brand, but in a different way. So I do much more grassroots work in the terms of we work with most education hubs across the UK, so I get to travel about the UK quite a lot. You do kind of see the great and the good of music education, and kind of, you know, some areas are thriving and some aren't so much, and we have a really nice kind of nationwide role where we can kind of bring some of those hubs together, to, especially when they turned into hubs, which is a really difficult point, you know, to try and work together and kind of better their experiences. And what I really like about Music for Youth is that it's not just about being the best. It's not about just being the best musician and the best performance. It is about creating kind of the best experience. Like, one incredible ensemble that we put on at the Proms once was a side-by-side project. So it was a project that Oxfordshire Music had put on, and every state school musician that was taking part was buddied with somebody from a local special school. And it was just phenomenal. And musically, it wasn't the best thing I've ever heard, but actually it was the best thing I've ever heard, because of what it meant and kind of what it was in order to put it together. So really, that's kind of how I came about. But I think, you know, having gone from somewhere that's, you know, the LSO to be a very music education, as a orchestral music education, I've then moved into a little bit more of the production side of things, again, which I really enjoy. It's really nice. It's a different experience, but a good one.
Okay, fantastic. It's really lovely to hear how your careers have all progressed and the journeys you've been on, and yeah, really inspiring. So thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us. We've got about 5 more minutes, so I've just got a couple of short questions to ask you. First one, and you've sort of answered this, each of you, in your own ways already, but maybe there are some other things that we can just say. But what advice would you have given your 18-year-old self? And my other question was, you've talked a little bit about work experience, so thank you for doing that. But are there any other things that you think that younger pupils could do while they're still at school to work towards different careers in music? I suppose I'm thinking in terms of sort of, you've all talked about keeping things very broad and picking up any opportunity to develop your skills. But I just wondered if there was anything else along those lines. So yeah, advice for your 18-year-old self, and anything else that you think, any other specific advice you think you could give to pupils who are still at school. Emily, sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, okay. This is something that I suppose I wish I knew it sort of 20 years ago, is that I just think we all have to be 10% braver. And I think particularly being women in the music industry, I think we just have to be a little bit more confident in our own abilities. And I think as time's gone on, I have become more confident in my own abilities. But even now, I have to tell myself to be 10% braver. And I think the other thing is just always try and think, am I making a difference? And I suppose that possibly might depend on your personality. But for me, you know, I want to make a difference. So everything that I do, I want to have impact on people around me, and just share my joy of music and music education. And I think that's it, really. But yeah, and with regards to work experience, I think don't be too picky. Try everything. I think, you know, even work experience of just working in an office, you know, even though you may think that's not relative to the music industry, actually having really good administration skills is something that you need as a freelancer, and in so many different sort of walks of your musical life. So I think, you know, really try and be broad. I know we have talked about that, but I think it's worth remembering, trying not to be broad just in a musical sense, but you know, in a skill set as well. You know, what skills do you need in your sort of career moving forward? So I think that's my advice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hannah.
I would say ask people to shadow them, ask people to go and watch what they do and learn from them just by sitting in repeatedly week after week, because you see how people work and what reactions they're getting out of the people they work with. So I'm always really happy when younger teachers, even older teachers, want to come and observe my teaching. And I like it the most when they come once a month or they come every week for a term, and they spend time observing and seeing what's happening and why the teacher is doing something or why that thing is happening. Because when you see something as a 1 minute lesson or a 1 minute whatever you're doing, you don't always understand the wider implications of that. And that also goes from one job always leads to the other, and you never know who you're going to meet at that moment. So by offering yourself to do anything, whether it's washing up for somebody or playing in a string quartet in somebody's garden, you never know who you're going to meet and who's going to listen to you and who's going to be impressed by what you're offering. And the next thing always comes from the last thing you did. It's always a chain. But meeting people and talking to people is really exciting. So do it as much as you can.
Thank you. And finally from you, Kate.
I think I would echo exactly what Emily and Hannah have said, really, but I'd just add on to it. It's just make sure you enjoy it, because none of us do this job for the money, let's face it. So enjoy what you do. And if you get to a point where you're not enjoying it, go and find a new experience or kind of go and take it down a different avenue, because there are lots of different avenues and there are lots of different conversations you can have with people. So just make sure you're, you know, like Emily said, you're making a difference and you're enjoying what you do. It's very important.
Okay, thank you so much. I really must thank you for giving up your time today. I know you've all got incredibly busy lives and incredibly busy families too. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. And yes, we wish you well with your careers, and you know you're always welcome to come and visit. We'd love to see you when that's possible. So please do, next time you're passing through Somerset, come and say hello. Thanks very much.
It was nice to see you.
Thank you.
Very
Take
much,
care.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
Massive crew.
Hello.
Doug and Alex and Jade, come on. Love it. Love to see it. What a reunion.
How's it going, everyone?
Jade, how are you?
How you all doing?
Yeah,
I'm good. I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, good.
It's been great seeing you all over the news.
Getting on the social media trend.
And Woman's Hour. I love Woman's Hour.
Yeah, she's cool, isn't she, Emma Barnett?
Yeah, she's a really good journalist, isn't she?
Yeah.
How are you, Alex? I haven't seen you in a long time.
Yeah, I'm good. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Thanks, guys, for doing this. We really appreciate it.
No worries.
Yeah, good.
How are you doing? You good?
Yeah.
Marvelous.
Are you all getting back to work now? Is it all starting to come together?
Yeah, maybe. Question mark. Hopefully, yeah.
Hello, Lusalika.
Hello. How's everybody? Everybody okay?
Yeah.
All good.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Good.
Marvelous.
So we're going to give out our email addresses for questions to come through, I believe, Ed. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, do you want me to do it? So what I'll say is, if anybody's got any questions for these guys here, if you could just email me on e.leaker, that's e.leaker at wells-cathedral-school.com, e.leaker at wells-cathedral-school.com. Then please just send those across, and I'll be keeping an eye on it as we go through. But I guess the best thing is if we sort of start, maybe everybody could just sort of introduce themselves. Jane and I could just say a quick hello. So I'm Edward Leaker, and I'm in charge of the woodwind department, and I also run the jazz and popular music at Wells Cathedral School. And I'll hand over to others just to explain what they do and where they are in the world.
Go for it, Ed. I think reintroductions. Why not?
Hello, everybody.
Take two.
Nice to see you. Sorry for any technical flaws. I'm sure it's my fault. It usually is. So, welcome to the jazz and the popular and commercial music segment of the afternoon. So, my name is Edward Leaker. I run the jazz and popular music departments at Wells Cathedral School, as well as being the head of woodwind there as well. We've got some brilliant guests on with us here who will, I'm sure, want to answer some questions for you. So if you could please, if you have any questions at all, just send them to me on an email. That's e.leaker at wells-cathedral-school.com, e.leaker, Leaker at wells-cathedral-school.com. So best thing to do is if we can just hand over to our guests, I think, just to introduce themselves and tell us a bit about what they're doing, what they do, maybe some career highlights and quick things so we can get some ideas of what sort of things we have been up to. Doug, can we start with you, please?
Yes, if you like, yes. Hi, I am Doug Harper. I play the drums, as you can see over there. My main job before everything sort of happened in the last year was playing drums on the Book of Mormon show in the West End in London. But yeah, before that, I've done lots of session work, done lots of touring, traveled a bit of the world, and all because of the great education I got at Wells. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Drums is my profession, basically. Yeah.
Fab. Jazz, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm Jazz. I also play the drums, as you can see. Come on, let's compare kits, Doug.
Yeah.
Look at that. Look at that. Yes. Kind of like, I guess I call myself a jazz drummer, but also play a lot of kind of pop, R&B, all of that kind of stuff. What's new? Playing with this band called Kansas Smitties in London, and then recently just moved to London like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I was living in Panama for a year before that, working with Danilo Perez, teaching students over there jazz music, and then learning from them some salsa music, which was amazing. And before that, I was studying in Berklee College of Music in Boston for 4 years, doing undergrad and masters, undergrad in contemporary writing and postgrad in jazz performance. And then before that, Wells Cathedral all the way. The roots.
Absolutely. You're all saying the right things. Alex, tell us what you're up to.
Hi, I'm Alex. I am a freelance jazz saxophonist amongst a smattering of other instruments occasionally. Usually find me, I guess, in a London jazz club somewhere with either my own band or another band, or a lot of the times these days on tours of theatres around the country, playing all sorts of jazz shows, which is all fun and games. And occasionally the West End thing thrown in if someone's kind enough to debt me a gig occasionally.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to my good colleague Jane and ask if she's got some questions for you folks. I've got some of my own, but I thought she might like to interject at this stage.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to Alex, Jazz and Doug for coming on this call today. I think it's really important to see, how our guys are doing. But I think my first question, if you could go back to your 18-year-old self what advice would you give about what's ahead? So just have a think about that. So Doug, if you could go back.
No, not me first.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Well, I'll start with Jazz in terms of the decision, Jazz, to move to America, because I think that's a really good, it's a really good thing for our guys to hear, because I think more so now students are thinking about moving away from the UK to do their undergrad studies. So, you know, if you had your time over, would you do that again?
Yeah, absolutely. I sometimes have this kind of question of like, oh, should I have waited till I was a bit older, you know, like maybe, but I do think there's a kind of beauty in going when you're 18 years old. I definitely didn't know. I wasn't ready, you know what I mean? I wasn't ready to go to Boston and be hit with this like American culture and obviously the roots of jazz and all of that. It was definitely like one of the most overwhelming experiences ever, but I think it's the perfect time for it to happen. I mean, I was young and it was all just kind of just soaking it all in and meeting like so many different kind of people early on was just like such an eye-opener. I learned so much just from being around the people, even, you know, besides from the lessons, obviously the incredible lessons that happen over there and the teachers you get to learn with, but yeah, it was more just a cultural experience and the social hangs and all of that. It was just, that was the true eye-opener. It kind of felt like I got a deep kind of perspective in jazz music too, you know, kind of experience some of the history that I'd been reading about before or learning about before firsthand. So yeah, 100% recommend as soon as you can, if you have the opportunity to go away. Yeah.
And has it been okay to come back and, you know, get back into the scene and, you know, pick up contacts? Has that been easy to do?
Yeah, actually, well, I mean, not easy. Don't want to say it's easy at all, but I think it's a good conversation. A lot of people ask, like, or afraid to kind of leave the scene because maybe you're going to be away for too long or something like that. But that's definitely not the case. It's like, I feel like there's just a place for everybody. At the end of the day, if you want to play and if you want to do your thing, do it wherever you are, whenever you are, you know. And if you want to take 6 months out or 5 years out and go and experience something else and then come back, there'll be a place for you. Like, and you'll be, you know, more experienced or have more. You'll develop more on your instrument or as a person, you know, all of these things. Yeah.
So how about you, Alex? How was life at Guildhall?
Life at Guildhall was great. I think so. The first thing I'd probably say is, from my perspective and from people I've heard and people I've spoken to and people I play with, I don't personally think, from a playing perspective, it matters where you go to college. If you work hard and you study hard and you surround yourself with the right people and you absorb as much knowledge from your teachers as you can. I've heard people that go to, you know, all sorts of conservatoires or people that didn't even bother going to music college, who all sound equally as great. But yeah, I found Guildhall great. You know, met a lot of my good friends there now. So yeah, I've got nothing bad to say about Guildhall. That was a positive experience, I think. And following on from what Jazz was saying, I mean, I connect with, especially over lockdown, I've been connecting with loads of people and hanging with them on, you know, on Zoom or whatever, just musicians in New York, musicians in Boston, musicians in LA, and just like hanging out. And it kind of just shows that the scene, as we think of it being kind of sheltered, you know, oh, you're on the London jazz scene, or you're on the New York jazz scene, or you're on this and that. I think over the lockdown, I've realised they're a lot closer to each other than you think. You know, it's a lot easier to be on multiple scenes at once, especially with, you know, Instagram and, you know, social media and all that. We have so much access to everybody these days that the boundaries between those things, I think, are collapsing quite quickly, which is interesting.
And Doug, I think if I'm right, that you got a job halfway through your Guildhall days. So
yeah, essentially, yeah, it was beginning of beginning of my second year that I got a kind of what they called a sub job on the Blue Man Group show, which essentially was an employed dep. So it was little enough work that I could still go to college, but it was enough work that it made me go, oh, there's work out there, and I could maybe go and do some of that work, you know. So by the time it got to my third year, the work thing had started to overtake the college thing. And if you're saying sort of look back at 18-year-old self and give some advice, I guess for me, I learned after 2 years of Guildhall that I didn't want to necessarily be a percussionist as such. I wanted to play drums, which I guess is a valuable thing to have learned. But maybe looking back, I would have said maybe do a drum course somewhere instead of doing a percussion course. You know? But yeah, I think what the other guys are saying is, with these kind of places, wherever you are, you're mixing with other people, you're getting to meet people. That is an essential part of becoming a musician and having a career and having people book you for gigs, because people want to book people they can trust and they know that they are the right person for the job, etc. But I guess what Alex is saying as well is, with social media now and things like that, those barriers of international sort of divisions maybe are coming down. But that's another new world that's opened up because of this whole pandemic as well, is the online live streaming and, you know, that whole side of the thing. So yeah, at the moment it's all very up in the air as to how everything's going to emerge from this situation, you know. But yeah, certainly for me, college was great. I learned a lot there. I met a lot of great people, but then when it came to the crunch, I left college halfway through because I had work, basically.
Yeah.
And ultimately, college is there to get you to the point of having work. So if you've got work, then, and it's getting in the way of doing the college stuff, then it's kind of ultimately not worth carrying on. Unless, of course, you specifically need that degree from the point of view of you want to teach or you want to do something.
Yeah.
But if you just want to go out and play, a degree is handy, but no one's ever gone, hey Doug, do you want to do this gig? Have you got a degree? You know what I mean? So ultimately it's working okay, you know. So
I was going to say it's not going too badly for you, is it?
Well, right now again, it's maybe not the busiest I've ever been, if I'm honest. But you know, we've got to see how it all works out, as I say, you know.
Thank you.
Can I just pick up on something that that Alex said, but pose the question to all of you, I suppose. So Alex said about surrounding yourself. Don't worry about which college you went to. Don't worry about where you've studied. Surround yourself with good people, which I suppose you're alluding to the idea of networking, and we know how important that is. And Doug and Jazz have also said things about, you know, meeting people that you work with for the rest of your life, so on and so forth. But that's a massively daunting task, I think, when you're 18 or 17 years old and people keep saying to you, you've got to go out, you've got to network, and you've got to meet people. Have you got any advice for sort of how to go about that, or where to start if you're an 18-year-old young player who says, right, I know I need to get out there and meet people, where can I go?
Well, I would say try not to approach it in a way of trying to get work. Try to actually, if you want to spend some time with someone or hang out with someone that you think might be a valuable colleague down the road, maybe don't approach it with, oh, hey man, I heard you doing this thing that you might want to have a drummer for, and you know, maybe just approach, the music business is very social, and I think people can sniff out people that are just hunting for work and actually they don't really care about you or whether you think this or whatever, you know, they just want to get the work. So try not to, in my opinion, try not to approach it from too much of an unnatural way, if you know what I mean. Just yourself, and you know, make friends the way that people make friends, and you know, ultimately things will grow from that, I think, you know. I mean, you guys may have other ways to go about it, but personally, I think because I was so young when I made a lot of the important connections I did, almost I wasn't too worried about trying to do anything. It just sort of happened. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, you guys may have other thoughts.
I totally agree. I think you've got to judge the situation and where you're at in your career and where you're at in your playing. So it started out for me as I don't know any jazz musicians that I know that if you approached them after a gig or at a jam session or at a jazz club and said, oh, hey, I really like your playing, you know, I'd love to get a lesson with you sometime, where they'd act in a hostile way towards you. I don't think I know anybody like that. And if they do, then that's their problem, not yours. and that's kind of how I started out. You know, I went to jam sessions, or I went to gigs, and I'd find someone's playing who I really liked, and I'd get chatting to them and ask them, for a lesson, and be humble. Don't go in and try and assert yourself in that situation. You've got to know your place, I think. And then as your playing progresses, it turns from, oh, I really like your playing, can I have a lesson, to, oh, I really like your playing, can we get together and have a play sometime, or do you want to be in my band, or these kind of things. And you've just got to judge the situation as you see it, I think. I had a masterclass with someone once who said, man, these young guys coming up to me and asking me for a play when really they should be paying me for a lesson. That kind of stuck with me, because you don't want to misjudge that situation and think your colleagues with somebody who is your kind of intellectual superior in a way.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's good to be bold.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, people can be funny about that, but from the people I know, the jazz scene is quite inclusive in the UK, and if you go and chat to somebody after a gig, you'll find that most of us are quite nice people, really, deep down.
Jazz, do you find that was any different in the States?
Oh no, totally feel what you're both saying, to be honest. I mean, yeah, the networking is a funny word, isn't it? Like that specific use of word for what that is. I think the Americans love it, absolutely love it. Like you get there and you're like, look who you're sitting next to now. You've got to be nice to this person because you're going to be working for them in 10 years or working with them or whatever. But I mean, I totally get what they mean by that, but I think it is a bit stressful to tell 18-year-old when they get to college that they better, be on the hustle and making friends for work. Like you're saying, Doug, it's not, I don't think. And also a relationship is not genuine if you're in it for, the opportunities that you're going to get out of it. And obviously that does happen, and you do end up working with people who you might have like networked with at some point in time. But yeah, I definitely think it's kind of just like you do in school, you've got your close friends and the people you hang out with, because you get along together, you vibe well together, and you like playing together, you like hanging together, you like eating together, whatever it is, playing sport together. I think with something I've learned, like just in life too, is that there's a lot more to life than just music and just work and opportunity. You know what I mean? You've got to enjoy yourself. You've just got to, and at the end of the day, you want to do a gig where you're on a gig with all your friends and you're having a nice time and whatever. A lot of the time we spend together is not just the playing, but it's also the time hanging off stage and in rehearsals and all of that. So
often more time doing that than actually playing.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, exactly.
And when it comes to networking, it's like there's plenty of gigs out there, and there's plenty of playing opportunities. And why would I try and be friends with somebody who, let's be honest, I don't like just to network with them? It's like, that's kind of bizarre to me. I just want to make friends with people and be friends with people, and you get work out of that, rather than trying to sign on to people who you don't like, or I don't see the point in that. I think that's
it's a bit miserable, isn't it?
That makes a lot of sense. Jane, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, I again, this is to Doug about the West End. If I'd had £1 for every student that ever said to me, oh yeah, I want to play in the West End, I would have retired by now. So tell me, what is playing in the West End? I mean, I've been very lucky to sort of follow your career and come along to, see you play in Hairspray and Book of Mormons and all these great shows. But what's it really like playing in the West End?
Ooh, big question. But I guess ultimately it's a brilliant way to make a living. But every brilliant way to make a living has downsides as well. So for example, when I first started working specifically in the West End, I was doing a lot of depping, which is covering for guys who do shows, for anyone that doesn't know.
Can I ask you if the rumour is true that you got that first gig because somebody fell ill and it was a tough show to read, and they went around all the freelancers, everybody was busy, and you got that gig when you were at college? Is that true?
Pretty close, yeah. If you're talking about Hairspray, yeah. Basically, when West End shows set up, they tend to have an exclusive period where you're contracted to do every single show. And then beyond that point, you have a certain percentage of the year that you have to do, but you can take the odd night off here and there. And as long as someone's there doing the show, it's all fine. Anyway, I went to sit in with someone doing who was doing Hairspray when Hairspray started during the exclusive when no one was allowed to take time off. A few days later, he fell really ill. And I was the only person that had been to see the show at that point. So they basically went, well, all the usual, and at this point I wasn't a known dep in the West End. I hadn't really done anything at this point. But yeah, everyone who was the normal call was busy. So they went, well, why don't we get that guy that sat in the other day because he's the only one that's seen it kind of thing, you know. But I ultimately turned up and played it really well, and it was all to a click track. So every tune, the MD before during the show happening, you know, is on the talkback mic going, right, so the next one you get 4 clicks in, it's at whatever BPM, and sight read it, good luck kind of thing, you know. And I basically got away with it. And that down the line a year later, essentially, I think got me the gig when that drummer left the show. And that was how I kind of got a bit of a bigger name for myself around the London scene, specifically within the West End. But back to your question of what's it really like, I mean, it's hard because, as I say, when I was depping, I was sometimes doing 10 shows a week of 4 or 5 different active shows. So I'd be doing 2 shows there, 1 show there, 2 shows there, running around doing lots of different stuff. So that was mentally draining because you went to remember 6 different shows and you're in a different place Monday, different place Tuesday, you know, blah, blah, blah. But then the flip side of that is doing your own show where you're sort of in charge and you pick a bit more when you work, but then you're playing the same show every single day. And that can get quite psychologically sort of, oh, it's this again, do you know what I mean? But then that's when you take a day off and you go for a night walk, and then you go back the next day and you go, all right, I get to play music, this is great, you know. But one thing I will say for anyone, as you're saying, you obviously get a lot of people asking, oh, how do I get into the West End, how would I do that, and blah, blah, blah. The biggest thing to understand is, especially at the moment, there isn't endless shows for people to do. There are only a finite number of shows. And each show will probably have on each instrument or each chair 4 or 5, maybe 6 deps for each chair. But they won't be different on every show. That'll be a lot of the same guys, as I said, like I did, that are moving around. So although there is work and although there is a scene there, especially at the moment, everyone's sort of feeling their way back into this new world, and we don't know there's going to be half capacity theatres and, you know, all of this. So don't just sort of go, I'm going to do that and that's all I'm going to do and I'm only going to focus on that. Because even if that is all you do as a musician, as a drummer, doing the West End theatre thing, I've had to play so many different styles of music, so much different things, bits of percussion in some shows, etc. So don't just sort of go, I'm going to do that exact pinpoint thing, and that's all I'm going to focus on, because that's not all I do. You know, I do other stuff. I do sessions and I do this and I do that. And now I've got this studio and stuff. I do some online things from here as well. And I guess the other guys here don't just do the one thing you do. You do other bits and pieces and you do other things, and you have probably other strings to your bow that bring in income from other different areas of the business. So, but yeah, to answer your question, it's great when it's great, but it can be tricky. Yeah.
No, that sounds absolutely fair.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about the sort of entrepreneurial sort of side of things. I mean, it's so important as a musician. The networking thing, to use that word again, is one side of it, but also being able to sort of basically you're running your own business, which is you're running yourself as a business all of the time. And I don't know whether you feel that you were sort of prepared for that. Is there anything that could have prepared you better for that before you started? Jazz, you look like you're ready to speak. Go for it.
Oh my God. The hardest part of the whole damn thing is like you just want to get up and play. You just want to practice. You just want to, you know, I was speaking to Zoe Sokol about it the other day, and he's, you know, can you imagine Cornelius Monk sitting there doing his emails? I can't picture it. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's very difficult, but you do learn as you go along, and I think you just have to not be afraid to ask questions and say, you know what, this is really difficult. Can I have some help? You know, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I wound up doing some taking that. I've always wanted to start my own business anyway, so the whole business world kind of fascinated me. So I did some, I've now occasionally work in marketing and business for music companies, and it's super important. As a musician, I remember being in sixth form and okay, so why should I try maths or English or any of these things? Because I want to be a musician. How's that going to be important to me? Trust me, when you're on page 100 and something of your Arts Council application and you're knee deep in numbers, you're gonna wish you tried harder in maths. And same, I'm in the position where I have to write press releases at the moment, and I have to write, organising my tour, I have to write bios, and I have to, write liner notes for my album and stuff like that. And you'd be amazed the amount of words I can't spell, and it's unbelievable. And I just think back to school, and I'm like, wow. I understand now why these things are important, and I've had to learn that the hard way. And profit loss on tours, and all of these things. I had to work that out myself. Don't be like me. You have help at school. Don't waste that opportunity.
Yeah, what do you think about sort of continuing on from that, I suppose? What do you think about the social media world? I mean, obviously you've also alluded to it, that it's important at the moment for a lot of people just to be able to connect at all. And of course, it's really wonderful that we can connect with people on the other side of the world. That side of it's wonderful. But I know there's sort of that slight sense that could it be the future? Could it be the way that people actually do find work and the way that things move in the future? What are your thoughts?
It's already been a thing. I mean, even before COVID or whatever, it's if you're releasing an album and you have 100 followers on Instagram, and typically 1 or 2% of your followers buy your album, then how many are you going to sell? If you have 10,000 followers on Instagram and 1 or 2% of people buy your album, how many are you going to sell? So it's been a thing for ages, and there's people that can out there with even saxophone players who have upwards of even 20,000 followers who can make an album and basically know they're going to break even on that album without even having to try to push CDs on their tour, whatever, just through social media sales. So yeah. If for that kind of thing, I think hugely important. In terms of getting work, in terms of gigs, I don't really know. Maybe Doug or Jazz can allude to that. I'm not sure.
I'm probably currently the worst person to speak to about social media because it was a year and a week, I think, since I last posted on Instagram. However, the short answer, I guess, to what you're saying there, Alex, is leading to work. No, not really. I mean, it doesn't really get me any gigs. It just maybe when I was actively trying to put a few things up and go, hey, check me out, I play the drums and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, it maybe reminded people that I existed, but I don't think it gained me any extra work. But then I've never really actively, because I've been lucky enough to have worked sort of constantly since I was about sort of 19, 20, I kind of didn't feel the need to do the social media thing. I was kind of like, well, I'm kind of fine just working. It's all kind of fine. But now I feel like I've dug myself a bit out of, dug myself a bit of a hole where I don't really understand the whole thing now. And I'm kind of like, I don't know what to do really. So let's just see what happens, But yeah, that's something I need to look into more because I think, yeah, the bottom line is it is going to be a bigger part of, well, like we're saying, branding yourself and promoting yourself as a business, but yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I definitely had some great advice from Toadin Canton once. Like, she did a workshop in the masterclass, and she was like, yeah, social media is all good, but at the end of the day, can you play? What I mean? Like, you better stay on, like, you've got to show up to the gig and you've got to play your ass off, basically. You can promote as much as you want in Instagram, but if the playing doesn't make up for this stuff you're posting online, then it's literally useless. But saying that I think social media is important. Yeah, it's like an Instagram page now seems as important as like a website page, or more important.
CV, isn't it? It's a CV. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's also really
what I've done with my career as a musician. Do you know what I mean?
It's also really easy to sound good on Instagram. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
just because you've uploaded take 111, of, you know, doesn't mean you're any good at what you're doing. It just means you've played that one thing round and round until you've got a passable take for social media. So, you know, it could be
Exactly.
misleading in that way.
Is that what you're doing, Alex? Now it all makes sense.
That's exactly.
It's all coming out now, isn't it?
Actually, yeah. I don't practice anymore. I just practice the stuff for social media. That's,
It's
one
all
lick.
video editing.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much, guys. I think we're going to have to wrap it up here, run out of time. But it's been absolutely fabulous to speak to you. It's so important for our pupils and for others as well to listen to what you have to say. And just really, really nice to catch up with you as well and just see what you're up to.
Brilliant.
And I think it's I mean it's great to see you guys, and we're really proud of what you all do, and fundamentally you're all nice people, and I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day, because everybody wants to work with nice people. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Very
Nice
nice
to
to
see
see
you
you.
all.
see you all.
Have a good one, guys.
Have a good one.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Hello. I think I'm going to be joined hopefully by some colleagues in a minute for the orchestral and freelance section of today's talk. And there they are. Hello.
Oh.
Hello. Hey.
Okay, I think we're all here. Let's go on gallery view. Right, let's so a very warm welcome Saturday afternoon in a grey England, where I am, to this talk, a little chat about orchestral life as an orchestral musician and as a freelancer, specifically. So I'm delighted to welcome three fellow old wellies, as we're glamorously known, Sophie and Anna and Bernice. Have I said your name correctly, Bernice?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. So my name's Ross Brown. I'm the coordinator of brass studies at Wells at the moment, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you all. If anyone has any questions for Sophie or Anna or Bernice watching, please do email them to me. My email is r.brown, as in the colour, and it's at wells-cathedral-school.com. That lovely email address that slips off the tongue. So please do send me your emails. I'll keep having a look at them. But to start with, shall we just go around the screen and would you like to just introduce yourself? And I thought for the first bit of this chat, we'll just forget about COVID, shall we? And talk about life, you know, in the good old days. So Sophie, you're my sort of top right hand. Would you like to go first?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm very happy to forget about COVID. That would be great. So yeah, I'm Sophie. I'm a cellist. I left Wells in 2006, I believe. Feels like yesterday. So I'm a freelancer. If I ignore the fact that the last year happened, I can usually be found in the theatre, I would say. I've had quite a varied career, which I'm very grateful for. But most recently, I've done quite a lot of theatre stuff. So opera, ballet, musical theatre. A big musical theatre nut. Actually, I made a quick list of the stuff that I did in the year before COVID hit, because it's actually quite hard to remember that far back now, isn't it? So I did quite a lot of English touring opera, which was fun, seeing different parts of the country. A little bit of English National Opera and a little bit of Opera North. So that was sort of my opera bit for that last year. Ballet, I've been lucky enough to kind of be a regular extra player with Birmingham Royal Ballet since 2015. And actually they've been doing some bits over this past year, so that's been great. In terms of musical theatre, for 4 months at the end of 2019, I was one of 2 cellists in the orchestra for the Les Miserables staged concert production in the West End, which was great. And I've done a bit of depping on other West End shows as well. And a little bit of depping work with 3 of the BBC orchestras as well. Yeah, I think that's me.
So pretty hectic.
Yeah, it was.
We'll come back to that. Anna, do you want to go next, please?
Oh, yeah. So hi, I'm Anna. I'm a violinist, and I also left Wells in 2006. I was there, I did my time at Wells. I was there for 9 years. So I joined when I was 9 as a specialist musician boarder. So I think I know every inch of most of the buildings in that city. So yeah, after I left Wells, I was with Richard Island for all that time as well. So I had the same violin teacher for all those 9 years, which was amazing. So after Wells, I went to the Royal College of Music and I did 6 years there. So I like to stay in places a long time, it seems. So I did undergrad for 4 years and then masters. And then in this couple of years post-college, I had a very busy and fulfilling sort of freelance time. And then in early 2015, I got my job, which is principal second violin at the Royal Opera House. So yeah, I've been there since 2015 and it's a very full-on job, very busy. So it leaves kind of a bit of time for freelance, again, pre-COVID times, a bit of time for freelancing. So I do a few sort of varied things. I do some guest work with some of the orchestras, principal work. I do bits of chamber and solo stuff, and we have like a 5-week summer. So in that time, I do try and do some, do various festivals that fit, and some teaching, and a fair bit of kind of film and TV session, which fits around the job quite well, as it's in London and the sort of slots that work. So yeah, that's the kind of basics of me, I think. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Bernice, would you like
Hi.
to go next?
Yes. Hi. Nice to meet you, Russ and Sophie. And I know Anna from when I was in Wales.
I think I haven't seen you since 2004.
No, it's been that long. So yeah, I left Wales at 2004, and I went to Indiana University in the US. I did 6 years there. And after that, I moved to Chicago and played with the Civic Orchestra of Chicago for a year. That's sort of like a pre-professional training orchestra. That's the training orchestra of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And after that, I got a spot at the Hyogo Performing Arts Center Orchestra in Japan, which is also sort of one of these kind of stepping stone orchestras. After that, I was there for 3 years. After that, I didn't have a job. And so I'm from Malaysia, so I moved back home to Malaysia, and I was freelancing for 2.5, 3 years, playing a lot with the Malaysian Philharmonic Orchestra, and I had all sorts of chamber music and other orchestra things. And then I got my job here in Stockholm, Sweden, and also the Royal Opera House. It's quite interesting, Anna, that we're both opera musicians. And so yeah, since I've been in Sweden for more than 4 years now, and yeah, so it's been an interesting adventure, I would say.
Okay, I've just realised I'm a brass player surrounded by string players, which is very nice. Real musicians. No, I shouldn't say that, should I? Okay, fantastic. Thank you all very much. So shall we talk about, so obviously you're all very fantastic musicians and you've been practicing lots, and we'll take it as read that you can play all the notes and you know the music backwards and that kind of thing. What other skills do you think it takes to be a successful orchestral musician and also a successful freelance musician? Shall we separate those, because they're sort of two slightly different things, aren't they? Although obviously they'll have lots of overlap. So shall we just take what is it about playing in an orchestra? How can you play in an orchestra successfully for many years? Sophie, should we start with you again?
Sure. Oh gosh, there's so many answers to this, but I think first and foremost, especially as a freelancer, you just have to be able to get on with people, because if you go in and you're grumpy and you don't talk to people and you say, oh, I hate this music, oh God, I had to get up so early this morning, but they have every right to just not ask you back next time. So, you don't want that to happen. Got to be on time, got to bring a pencil, all those boring things. I think also it's quite easy for musicians to get quite jaded quite early on, and it's almost become like a cool thing to say that you're not enjoying your job anymore. And I think it's totally fine to just let everyone know that you're enjoying yourself. Let everyone know your interests. Actually, that's one of the main things I wanted to say, I think, was it's a really good thing to just let people know what you're interested in. Because if you put it out there, then opportunities tend to kind of come to you. You become a magnet. Whereas if you're like, oh, I'm a bit ashamed of the fact that I like musical theatre, or like, can I say this? I love country music. Can I say that? I said it. You put that stuff out there, then people come to you. Like, I definitely got a musical theatre gig because someone was like, oh, I just remembered you told me you really loved that show, so I thought of you. I think I may have gotten a bit off topic now, but I've been storing up all these ideas.
Let them out. Let them out. Keep going.
Let me pass on to someone else now, maybe.
I'd say I totally agree. Just don't underestimate the social aspects of it. You know, whether you're freelancing or you're trialing for a job or whatever, you want the people around you to not be able to wait for you to come back in, rather than be, thank goodness, you know, this project has ended. You want people around you to don't underestimate how important it is to you know, yeah. And also, as Sophie was saying, like, to be positive. Yeah, you're so right. You know, it's so, there are a lot of jaded musicians, and it is almost cool, yeah, to be like, oh, for goodness sake, there's this, and actually, no, who do you want around you? People who are positive and make you remember why you're doing it. And also, I think it's easy to don't forget the reason why you're doing it. You know, especially when you're the age of leaving leaving school and going to college, you know, you're spending hours in a practice room, and of course, as you need to do, you know, you have your focus and the intensity of it, but don't forget why you do it. And hopefully it's because you love music, and, you know, so you've got to, it's so important to remember why you're doing it, and be able to kind of see outside of what you're doing sometimes when it's that intense. Yeah, I suppose I think that was, yeah. And the other thing I guess I would say, it's not quite an answer to your question, I guess, Ross, but I'd say in terms of success, I'd say one of the biggest pieces of advice I'd say is take pride in everything you do, because you never know who is at a concert you're doing or a rehearsal you're doing. You know, even if you're stepping in, you never know who's sitting next to you, who's taking the rehearsal, what that will lead to. So take pride, be prepared. That's one of my biggest pieces of advice as well. Over prepared for everything you do, so that, because you never know who's there and you never know what it will lead to. So just take pride in everything you do, and never think, oh, it's just this rehearsal, it's just this, because especially when you're starting out, every bit of work you do matters, and you're getting your name known. So I think that was slightly off topic too. But.
No, not at all.
I actually, yeah, I completely agree with you guys. I was also going to say, it's kind of, it's so cool these days to be like, I'm sight reading, I'm I'm too good for this part or whatever, and that's in a way sort of okay for the orchestra musicians to say that, but it's never okay for the sub or the dep to say that, never. So one of the first really important advice that I ever got was never say that you didn't practice. Even if you didn't, even if you really did not have time, even if you were just called like 1 hour before, they all know that, or the ones that need to know that you were called only 1 hour before, and they knew that you didn't have time to practice. But you don't say ever yourself you didn't practice. You go in with the right attitude. You go in liking it and wanting to work. It's all too often the case where the people in the orchestra are like, oh, not another day, it's another Monday, oh, we're working late today again. But and it's hard. I remember as a freelancer, it's difficult to know how to act with people like this. But I think try to just be positive and have the right attitude. Be humble. Don't try to tell someone in the orchestra who's like who's already jaded. Don't try to tell them, well, but this is a fantastic piece of music. Well, I mean, don't be a smart aleck, but but yeah, be confident, but don't be cocky, I would say.
Yeah, I guess it's like any also social interaction. You've got to be a bit of a chameleon, because you've got to judge. Say you're coming in on trial, say you were doing a trial in my section, you've got to judge when you're sitting next to that person, sort of how you have to be, and then when you're sitting up at the front for your trial next to me, how you have to be. You have to be a bit of a chameleon and be able to judge what you're sort of, who you're talking to, etc.
And I also really completely agree with Anna. Be over prepared, and in fact, there's very very rarely any time when you're over prepared. I noticed that the longer I'm in the profession. So last year I was on trial for another position at another orchestra, and I realized that the preparation that I did during this trial was like maybe 5 times more than when I was on trial for my current position. And I just realized it's not so much that I'm a worse musician because I need more practice, but I realized that I noticed that there's so many more details that I'm missing out when I'm practicing in the past. So there is really, it's hard to be over prepared. And if you're subbing, if you're coming, like if you're jumping in, it's better to prepare more than to prepare less.
Okay, so we've got 3 P's then, haven't we? Really, we've got be passionate, we've got be prepared, and I can't for the life of me think what the third one was. Prepared, passionate, practice. That kind of comes with there was another one. Oh, I thought I was being really clever then. Anyway,
with a P.
With a P, yeah. Okay, so how do we? Let's go into a little bit more detail for those. How can you? In what ways can you prepare? For example, you're turning up to a concert with an orchestra, and you have 1 3-hour rehearsal in the afternoon before the concert that evening. How can you? What are good ways to prepare? Sophie.
I do quite a lot of mental practice, so it's not physically draining. I spend quite a lot of time just with the music, the sheet music in front of me, listening to it. I think that can be really helpful. It puts you in the frame of mind of actually being within the orchestra when you can hear everything, instead of just sort of sitting on your own in the corner playing your own part. I don't know, yeah. And also another really important thing, I suppose, look after yourself physically as well. Obviously all the practice is important, but make sure you get enough sleep, drink water, eat well. Mental health is so important, and it's fantastic that people are starting to talk about that more now. I feel like even in the last 10 years it's changed. Like when I first started freelancing, no one really talked about mental health and how burnout is a real thing. And if you talk to any musicians now, that pretty much all of them will say, oh yeah, I've struggled with my mental health at one stage or another. So yeah, it's important to kind of check in with yourself on those things, and to take the time out if and when you can. Again, slightly veering off there, but I think all
yeah. Anna, have you got any tips about how to prepare?
I would say a way which I find really useful and kind of can speed up the process is if I listen a lot with the score, and it really helps. And if you know cues, and it really helps, because there are times, let's say, you can't rely on the conductor in front of you, and if you know exactly what you're with, who you're after, like all these things, if you know the score inside out, then you're bulletproof. And it goes without saying in terms of the notes, and your part, you have to be on top of it. But in terms of being like bulletproof like that, in the moment, if you have things to latch onto and things, it really helps. So just listening with the score, and that, as Sophie was saying, that's not physically draining. You can sit there and it really helps, because if you haven't got a lot of other help going on, at least you have that, and you have that kind of mental security that you can fall back on.
And we're all human, aren't we? Even conductors sometimes make mistakes, don't they?
No.
Horror. Anyway, let's not go down that road. We've only got another 9 minutes.
Yeah.
Bernice, any tips?
Yeah, I actually find this really helpful. Is that once I've kind of sort of got the notes learned, I would listen and play with the music playing with the headphones on. I find that that is almost like playing in the orchestra, except the orchestra keeps going, and then you realize that, okay, well, I'm playing this, like, this note completely wrong, or I'm playing this rhythm actually really wrong, and it really helps to know maybe who's playing the melody there, who is more important. I think that this is almost as this is like score study, but like the shortcut version.
Karaoke violin. Karaoke violin is and everyone's like slightly ashamed to say it, but I think it's like
I really think it's like the shortcut. And it helps with so many things. It's like, oh, I forgot to put my mute on, or I'm really slow with this page turn, or just like little things like this that you don't notice when you're practicing alone. Okay, I counted okay, I have 15 bars rest, here's 15 bars rest, and then you completely zoned out, and then you're like, oh wait, I'm supposed to play now. And these are the things that you wouldn't think of when you're practicing yourself, but then when you're playing it with the music going on, you're like, it's front and center. So I find that really helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. Positive, that was my other P. Remain positive, passionate, and I can't remember, prepared. Right, prepared. I'm only going to have 2 P's in my head at once. Okay, cool. So how do you get work? How do we get work as maybe an extra player, or being invited into an orchestra the first time, or how do you get a trial with an orchestra? Should we just talk through that scenario? Sophie, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, God, there's so many different routes, so many different ways in, that I think you just have to take as many opportunities as you can get, because as Anna said before, you never know what anything is going to lead to. So I think my first kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a big break, but my first kind of extra work with a professional orchestra was BBC Symphony Orchestra. And the way that I got that, I had no idea that it would lead to this, but I did a funding audition for, I think it was a Help Musicians or Musicians Benevolent Fund funding audition for postgrad funding. And I didn't get it because there was only one award going, but I happened to bump into the principal cellist of BBC Symphony Orchestra a few months later. And she said, I'm so sorry we couldn't give you the award, we could only give one, but we enjoyed your playing and we always need extra players in the section, so why don't you send in your CV to the orchestral manager and we'll see what we can do. And that was 10 years ago, and I've been going in with them off and on ever since. So there's that. You can also go the kind of more traditional route of auditioning, because quite often if you don't get the job with an orchestra, you might still end up getting regular extra work with them. So that's what happened with me in Birmingham Royal Ballet. Also just, being friends with people. People think of you. It's practicing on your own will only get you so far. I think the connections increasingly are more and more important. So just putting yourself out there, not in a kind of look at me, I'm the best kind of way, but just being genuine and being interested, and then people will think of you for opportunities. And not thinking that you're too good for anything early on. Like when you leave music college, just even if a gig sounds awful and maybe doesn't pay so well and maybe it takes 3 hours to get to, you don't know who you're going to meet there. So I suggest take everything, and you might even just, it might be terrible, but at least you've got a funny story to tell. And you might get some more work.
Okay, cool. Anna and Benny, do you want to add anything to that, or is that?
Yeah, well, not really. As Sophie said, there's many different ways. So when I was doing the chamber orchestra work in my couple of years before I got my job, so something like Academy St Martin's the Fields, I did an audition, and that was just like extra work in chamber orchestras. And chamber orchestras, sometimes you audition, a lot of it is sort of you played with that person who is in sort of, and they're needing some new extras, you know, that it can happen like that. And in my orchestra, the extras in my section, so it has happened that people have come and done auditions for jobs in the orchestra, and like Sophie was saying, they haven't got a trial with us, but actually, you know, we've decided as a panel we want to give them some extra works that can happen like that. Or if people write all the time to us to either come and play, or if it's someone who we know of as a player, then they may start coming as an extra. So there's all manner of ways, and you definitely can write to chamber orchestras and kind of principals in orchestras to come and play for them. And then it so happens if you write at a good time and they're looking for some extras and they have time to listen, then that can happen that way and they really enjoy it. So there's lots of different ways, and it can be, someone knows you're playing, they know you're looking for a certain type of work, and it can happen like that. So it's all manner of ways, I think, in London when it kind of happens.
Yeah. So take advantage of every opportunity to play to people, and be proud of your playing and prepared, and
and don't be afraid. And don't be afraid to write to certain orchestras or write to principals and orchestras and say, because people can always say no, you know, it's definitely worth it. Yeah.
We're just about to run out of time. I mean, we haven't really touched on, obviously we've been talking about orchestral work and playing in orchestras as either as if it's your position or on a freelancing basis. Obviously, if you're a freelancer, you know, there will be times when you don't have any work in your diary, and then you're not earning money. So it's fantastic to be involved in all the outreach which orchestras put on. This is another branch which is becoming increasingly mainstream now, isn't it? The kind of outreach work with school kids or vulnerable adults or people with special educational needs or all that kind of thing. And actually, I don't know about you all, but that has been provided me with some of the most memorable and fulfilling musical experiences to do with communicating what we all love doing to people, you know, rather than being stuck in a pit or whatever, which is wonderful, you know. But just try and be open. Sorry to sort of, you know, on the whole orchestral thing, but try and just do everything, and you know, even if you think I'm not sure this is for me, say yes to pretty much everything. That's what we're saying, isn't it, here? And be positive and passionate and well prepared. Thank you, Bernice. Good. Let's not go down the COVID route, but because I think everyone watching this will hopefully be young enough to, you know, things are going to change. Obviously in the music profession, things change all the time anyway. You know, that's the nature of the music profession, and musicians are always very, very good at adapting. And, you know, if you say yes to everything, that's a good start, and just try everything. I think that it's very hard to do it in sort of 28 minutes, isn't it? But I think we'll probably have to leave it there. Apparently there is a feedback form which I've been asked to please fill in if you're watching on, where's the feedback form, Tim? Apparently it's in YouTube. Is it in the YouTube? It's in the YouTube stream. Okay.
On the YouTube stream, yes.
Thank you. It's in the description of the YouTube stream. So please fill that in. And a huge thanks to Sophie and Anna and Bernice for joining us and giving your time. It's fab to see you all. And thanks for sharing all your experiences and thoughts on freelancing in orchestral work. So thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.